Hello, everybody. Glad that you're here. And this week we're going to be introducing something different that we've been doing. And it's going to be interviews meant to show God's testimony through people's lives, through their struggles, through their joys, through their pain. And so it's going to be just a different thing for us. And this week we're going to start with me. And literally I'm going to be sharing my grief story. And that's why I've got my late wife's picture up here, because it just is a beautiful reminder of her life to me. And I couldn't think of anyone better to ask than my dear, dear friend, Robb Horner. And Robb is there for me through thick and thin, and not just this. There's plenty of other things to tell for another day. But even in this piece, he was a massive, him and his wife were just massive blessings for me and my family. So, Robb, I'm glad you're here, and I would like for you to just tell the folks what you do besides being pastor to all and friend to all, but what you do professionally and a little bit of the study that you had to do for that. So take it away.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm sorry that we're here for this discussion, but I'm glad that you're willing to use your experience to help other people. So that's an amazing part of your testimony. My work experience is that I work on a daily basis throughout the week trying to help people in whatever they're dealing with at Life Counseling Center. So technically, I'm a licensed professional pastoral counselor. So that required some education, master's degree, and eventually a PhD. I do a lot of work with temperament and really helping people, mainly recovery, but also marriages who are struggling. But this grieving is universal to everybody. So I found out pretty quickly I better get a better understanding of what it is to grieve and how to help others through it, because everybody is grieving over something.
Right. Very good. So I guess we've decided we're just going to start off by me talking about the day. And the day that lives in infamy in my mind is July 10th of 2022. And the day was a Sunday, and I was at a church meeting. And to give some background to people who don't know, is that the year before, 2021, my son Hunter and I began to learn how to free fall skydive. And we got licensed and did all that. And then the next year, my wife Laura wanted to do that with our daughter Hannah. And so they were in the process of that. And she was roughly, I think on that date, like on her fifth or sixth jump. And it'd take me too long to explain all that. But the big thing I want to make sure that is clear is a general overview of the events that happened. So I wasn't there, but my son was there and my daughter was there. And at some point I called because I was deciding whether I was going to go there or not. And they were like, or Hunter was like, Mom landed off. And that's not a big deal. Like, you land off, and I've done it before. I've landed in a green bean patch, just it's funny experience. But so I wasn't terribly concerned at that point. And then, he called me back and said, hey, Mom, she's got a broken leg and some lower back pain, and she was in the woods. So to fast forward as to what happened, it's called not pulling at a pull altitude. If you're not stable, you have more time, but she didn't do it, and she ended up doing what she was supposed to do and pull her reserve cord. So they don't even know whether or not the AAD, which is a safety mechanism that deploys your chute if you're unconscious, they don't know which one did first, but they knew that the ring was gone, so she had pulled it. So she did the right thing. She was under canopy of the reserve, and I've been, sadly, I've been under reserve canopy twice, and they're amazing. They're made incredibly well, and they pop out fast. So she was under canopy. It's not like there was this event of her falling to the ground.
Right.
And she landed in the woods and landed on a pine tree, and you're supposed to go for the main part of the tree. You don't want to avoid a tree because of some of what happened. So she hit that. She clung to the top of the tree. The top of pine trees are pretty brittle, or they're not strong. Yeah. And the pine tree bent over and broke, and she fell to the ground. It's called a high fall. And so her instructor literally did some amazing things to find her, and I can't thank him enough, because he literally pulled super late himself to get to the edge of the woods and find her. So that made a lot of things, like getting her help right away. So trying to fast forward the story, my son helped extract her from the woods with multiple fire departments. And at that time, he called me and he said they're going to bring a precautionary. The state police the state police are going to do a precautionary flight in their chopper to shock trauma. Okay,
if I can pause. Sure. So at this point, the report you got was somewhat encouraging.
Yep.
That she had just sustained an injury, but she had gotten to the help she needed.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have a brother-in-law that's in the Caroline County and paramedics, and he called and he was checking all the information. Even my daughter, who is a NICU nurse, she was with her mom and listening to all the reads of all the blood pressure and everything was relatively normal. They thought she was just in shock, but they said that she was more concerned. Fast forward a little bit, some of the paramedics when they found out that she passed, they had to get counseling because she was such a delightful person, on the ground. Sounds so they were shocked. But I didn't know any of this. I knew the stats were good. Mm-hmm. And my youngest daughter, Evangeline, I asked Hunter, I'm like, what do I do? Do I come there or do I go to shock trauma? He told me to go to shock trauma. And I did, and Evangeline and I are in the truck, and I'm going, well, we're going to have to get the bed downstairs for Mom.
Right.
And we're going to have to take care of her, if she has some lower back pain, whatever. So Hunter's mind was that I would be the first face she would see there, since she saw her son and daughter there, and that we would get there. So,
and I think it was about this time, being on the receiving end. I think this is about the time the first message the first community got, which was that she had an accident, she had some injuries, but it appeared that she was going to be okay.
Right.
So we all were kind of first shocked, and then we took a deep breath, like we're thankful that she's going to make it. So this story comes in waves. That's kind of the point I'm making.
Yeah, it really did. And so Evangeline and I got to shock trauma, and we go in and we sit down, and never been in the waiting room of shock trauma before, and it's stuck in my head. But they had, I would say it was probably they had a doctor. They had two doctors come out and a chaplain. And I just sort of felt like that's probably normal protocol there. They took us to a private room and they said, tell me what you know. So I sort of told them what I just told you. And they're like, that's right. But over in the air, she had a cardiac arrest. And she is in the operating room with two of the best surgeons in the country. That's what the doctor told me. At that point, stuff got real.
Yeah.
We were sort of in shock. I believe Hannah, no, she wasn't there yet. She was on her way. So everyone came in droves in different points. So my oldest daughter, Hannah, came after that statement. And so she came, and I'm like, hey, this is what's happening. And we were a little more concerned. And so I reached out to the kids to sort of, I didn't really say too much. I can't even remember what I said, to be honest with you. But I knew I didn't want to alarm them with them driving. I didn't want them to be too, reckless driving or anything like that. So whatever amount of time it was after that, we were in that room. It was me and Hannah and Evangeline. And this doctor came in, and she was masked up, and then she pulled her mask down and knelt at my feet.
Wow.
I was sitting down, and I knew. Like, the only way I can tell you is I just wanted to pause and rewind. That's literally was a thought in my head.
Yeah.
No, this can't be. And
yeah.
So the three of us were there, and we all just lost it. I mean, it was brutal. It was unbelievable. It was a tsunami event. And I tell you what's worse, though.
What's that?
The hour and a half we had to wait for the rest of them to come. So we're sitting in the room. They thought she just had a broken leg.
Right. They didn't know.
There was an urgency. But we knew, and I knew that I wasn't going to tell them on the en route. I even went to the guard up front and said, look, if my kids come, don't you say anything. Just have them come back. And that hour and a half, I still remember it. And Hannah actually saw in a movie where they said the worst thing is the slowness of time. It doesn't get any worse than having to wait to tell someone horrific news. And I feel that. Like, it was horrific news, but then having to sit there with that hour and a half and redo it. Woo. So, they came, and we sat there for a long time and just grieved as a family. And, not what I would want anyone to have to go through, but we were together. And at that point, I started really, once they knew, I started making my phone calls to everybody. And brother, I can still remember the words you said. It was a guttural, like, what? It was a painful what? It wasn't like, what? It was, I still remember it. And I just had all those phone calls to make, the key people that needed to know. Family, Laura's family, all that stuff.
And being just on the edge, like a first responder, and wanting to be able to help, I'm sure a lot of people have been in that situation, even if it hasn't happened to them, someone so close. And I can tell you the first feeling is helplessness. It's just helpless. And in a way, it becomes, we also have this kind of a secondary trauma. Mm-hmm. And we certainly can't compare to yours. But then as helpers, we want to help, but we're also processing our own loss.
Yeah.
And that could be just difficult. That's part of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. No, it was, it wasn't fun for anybody, for sure. Yeah. And, so we went through this thing, and I will say this as an aside. I've always said that I would never want I never want to go to a viewing again. And I never want to do I just don't want to do that. I want to remember them. Mm-hmm. But in my heart of hearts, I was there. The chaplain said, do you want to, view her body? And first I was like, no. And I'm just like, you know what? I remember Laura with her mom and her holding her hand. Mm. And I was like, she would want me there.
Yeah.
So a couple of the kids decided that they wanted to do that too. And we went up there. Now, why I tell you that, that's a very intimate moment, but all I'll say is this, is the last, in moments when you're alone and you don't believe she's really gone, mm-hmm. It was helpful for me to know that I knew. And that was the opposite of anything I ever thought before. So it defeated that lie in my head, like, she's not gone.
Yeah.
So everyone's got to do what they do and what works for them, but I want to tell you that, and I've heard a couple other people say the same thing, that when you don't believe it's actually happened, that helps cement it. And I just kissed her, and, that was that. And we ended up all having to make our way back to Easton. And that's where you and Beth and Todd and Ashley were there to meet us. And I need to say, too, there were other people who wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to discount that, but it was just enough. It's sort of the right amount of people for what we needed. And so I still remember, I think we were up till 1 something. I think you all were there. It was late or early, depending on how you wanted to look at it. And, you all just sat with us in your grief and our grief. You just sat with us. And I still remember telling Todd, I was like, I don't see this whole King David thing of getting up after 7 days. And he was very like, no, I don't think so. It was like, that was just in my mind. I'm trying to, what's this look like? Because I had no idea. And that was just the beginning of stuff.
I think the better picture I'm learning now, in retrospect, the better picture was the friends of Job. That at least for 7 days, I heard a pastor say one time they offered perfect counsel. They sat quietly, silent with him in his grief.
Yeah.
They were perfect until they started to try to explain it. So that may be a encouragement for people who think they have to say something or they have to bring forth some wisdom. Just be there.
Yeah. Nothing, just presence.
Yeah.
Presence is everything, because I didn't need a theological education at that point.
Absolutely.
And I might have.
It would have made it worse, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I might have been angry.
Yeah.
I might have, some of my stuff would have come out, but that didn't happen,
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for that.
There's going to be a theme, I think, throughout our conversation is giving people permission to grieve while we try to, as a helper, manage your anxiety to try to fix it or even to rescue them. It's a very different approach. And it's taken me years of being with a lot of people and doing it the wrong way to just allow and trust the process that God is here with us, that you don't have to advertise or give direction to, but just be there for comfort and compassion and try to resist fixing it.
Yeah. I couldn't have done it without my family, our church friends, other churches, the messages and expressions of love. Like I got so much, and it wasn't all I could do. I just loved every message. I read every message, but I decided I was not capable of responding.
Right.
But I just wanted them to know, and I wanted to be consistent, and I just loved them.
So even sending you a message of comforting was received and felt. So that was important.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It being silent in those moments, like I just had to do that the other day, and you're aware of the situation. Like there was sort of like, don't talk about this, like leave them alone, and I was like, I can't do that, because I knew what it's like to be in a difficult situation, and I'm like, no need to respond, no need for any update. I just want you to know I'm here and I love you. Because I remembered what those type of things meant to me. If people were, I don't think anyone pressured me that I had to respond to them. And that was cool.
Yeah. So we can do that for others even now, just a word of encouragement, and also not expect a response.
Yeah. And they'll not, I'll just say, I will never forget. Like I had to eventually get rid of some texts, and I wish I could have figured out, just because my phone was running out of room. But
right.
I have tons of stuff that I recall, and it warms my heart. It's a blessing. But in the meantime, on a personal note, I was angry, and I had that. I didn't verbalize any of it. And I'm talking to God. I was angry with God. I didn't say a word. I didn't say a word to God. And some of the rationalizations were, hasn't it been enough? Haven't I gone through enough? All this, and I've served you, and this is what I get. You know, it's this transactional relationship with God.
Yeah.
And I knew it was all sort of wrong, but that's what I felt. That's the honesty of what I felt.
Sure.
And I walked out that next morning, that Monday morning, and I was outside crying. And I'm just like, I just want to sell everything and leave and disappear. So whether I was going to be on the Keys with a fishing rod, growing a big beard, looking like, or in the mountains somewhere on the Appalachian Trail, just hiking and, you know, escaping.
Yeah, you just want to get away.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just, I wanted to quit life. I'd never wanted to kill myself. But I did go, God, why didn't you take me? Because she was a better person. Like, she was, I mean, the response from the community just reinforced that. Like, she was just loved by so many people. And I'm like, man, I'm a lot more difficult than she was.
Yeah, you're describing what's called the bargaining stage after the shock. And we'll talk about there's, you know, stages to identify. But that bargaining stage is asking the questions. Why not me? Or maybe if I'd done this, or maybe if this had happened. And our mind, at least for a season, it doesn't seem to want to shut off the questions and the what ifs until eventually we kind of exhaust the questions that don't have an answer.
Yeah.
And that's our invitation to move into the next phase. But you were also experiencing, amongst all this, you were experiencing simultaneously the bargaining, the anger, maybe the rage.
I don't think I had rage.
Okay.
I don't think. No, I never violently acted out to anything. I was just quiet. I was stewing, simmering.
Yeah.
You know, I'd already come to a boil inside, and I just sat there for a bit. But I didn't want to be, you know, no one was like, I knew the whole curse God and die from Job's wife, and I knew I didn't want to curse God.
Right.
So I didn't. I did not. But it took until Thursday morning for me to get a prompting from God. It's the first time I felt like I heard from him. So from Sunday till Thursday morning, I heard nothing. I felt nothing from God.
So what did you hear on that Thursday?
You're going to sound funny. It was like, get up, take a shower. It was like 5 a.m. Go to Dunkin' and go to Walmart. I'm like, Dunkin' makes sense, like in my mind. And I drove up to Dunkin', and the lady there, her son works with me at UPS, and she was there, and she wrote this beautiful message on my cup.
Wow.
It was just this simple thing that she didn't have to do. It's not like we were best friends or anything, but she knew, and she wrote, you know, on there. And so I left there touched by that. I was like, wow. And then I drove to Walmart, and I'm walking into Walmart, and this is the first time I said anything to God. What am I doing here?
Seems like a fair question.
Well, it's just, you know, you want to be this pastoral, great Christian type. And I was just like, why am I here? And so I just started walking the aisles. And I came across, first off, is like all of Laura's family were en route or already there. And I knew we were going to have all these meals. And I was trying to figure out, I had to put myself to work in a sense. And I found all these colorful plates and cups, and I'm like, she would not want anything drab. So I got the biggest, brightest stuff for when people came over. So when they, you know, when they came over and outside tables were there, they were her hot, the pink and the green, the lime green, the things that she liked, and some purple, they were all there. And so I walked there, and then I turned a corner, and right in my face was sidewalk chalk. That's when I knew why I was there. And it was very clearly that it was like God said, that's why you're here.
And what was done with that chalk?
So I believe it was that Thursday. I wrote a Facebook message just thanking everyone. Well, just sort of, actually, it was more of a request. Say, look, Laura was a photographer. If you have pictures, if you have a story, if you have anything, and if you or your kids want to draw on the sidewalk of the church, I'm going to supply the chalk. Would you please do that? No idea what the response is going to be. No idea. And so that went out, and people started flooding her Facebook page and mine. They were tagging us and sending me messages of personal, more intimate stories. So I'm just reading them, and that's putting air in my balloon. Like, it hurt at the same time. Like, I don't want to, it made you feel the loss, but it also was just like, you all knew who she was. You knew who I knew. You knew who God knew her as. And so it was hard. It wasn't easy, but it was sweet. And so I remember Friday, me and my nephew were driving. We had to go pick up stuff for the celebration of life and the after thing. We drove by the church here, and there were just a plethora of
everywhere.
Kids and adults, and there was color everywhere. And I didn't have the nerve to get out at that moment, but I just honked my horn and just went like this, like, thank you, because I just couldn't embrace it just then. So, all those things happen, and I think I came maybe it was later that day, and I walked, and there were some people I knew, and I just cried in their arms looking at the beautiful, beautiful drawings and the kids' names, and, just things that, which is really where the Love Like Laura came from. And that's going to be on her marker in Oxford.
Yeah.
That phrase was there. And I just walked, and I was overwhelmed, and I just wept, but it was cool.
I think it's really powerful that the first message or sign that you got from the Lord that took you to Duncan, that somebody was there to share their grief with you and their encouragement. And I think that's such a powerful part of the story, because as you were working through your own grief, you saw that so many people kept coming alongside you in their expressions of her, and you weren't alone.
Yes.
And no doubt you felt in those first few days, you felt an aloneness, helplessness. But I'm thankful you had people around you, and you didn't isolate, and that you went out and got your coffee, and you went to Walmart. So at some point you were obedient to get up. And it was so important.
It was a big step. Like, it sounds like not a big deal getting up and going to Duncan, but being just empty, just on empty and empty. It took a lot. It took all I had. Yeah. And I had to do it early, because I was not, I just thought of this. Walking through stores and seeing people who don't know me, but seeing them going along with their day was like, don't you know? Inside my heart's just going, don't you know? And it's totally illogical, but it was almost like I was angry at people for not being sad. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, so that was a thing I had to get over. It took a little bit just to go, and then it was like, okay. And then I had a lady come up to me, and she's just like, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in your youth group, and like, you and Laura just changed my life, and now I'm serving in another church as a youth leader. And and she's like, can I hug you? And I'm like, absolutely. So it transitioned to people who were comfortable with coming around and coming up to me really were a blessing. Now, I can't say that if I stayed in my anger mode that would have been the case, but I want people, and still, if anyone listens who feel like maybe they're uncomfortable talking to me, I want to hear all the stories. I want you to tell me, and that's what our family does.
Yeah.
But, we had to get to Saturday and the celebration of life, and,
could you share with us some of the larger things that were going on that you began to see God doing, even in the midst of that tragedy and that horrible day? What's some of the backstory that you saw God doing?
Well, it's funny because I used to be a youth pastor at Talbot Bible, and Dan and I are friends. And before Laura died, we just moved to right on Chapel Road, and I'd drive by the church every morning, and I'd pray for him and I'd pray for them, and I'd see they had a VBS tent up, but they had like a community yard sale. Then they had VBS, and then it was like a week or so. And Dan, if you watch this, just take it as my humor. I kept going, why isn't that tent down? Because Dan's organized. Like me, it might be there next year. But
Right.
but Dan's like, and so we were you and I and Todd, I think, and whoever else were sitting, some of my kids outside. We were talking about what to do because we felt the church wasn't going to be big enough.
Yeah, where to have, the more people we kind of heard were coming, it was kind of a little overwhelming to try to figure that out in just a couple days' notice.
And I believe, and Real Life offered their building and to be a satellite for it. And I believe it was you that was like, have you thought about Talbot? It's right down the road. They've got this tent up, and it was just like, yeah. And I believe you called. And you should tell me that story because you called Dan.
Well, because Dan very early had said, whatever we can do, and he said we because there was obviously a lot of relationship there. A lot of people cared for you and Laura. So I just remembered him saying, whatever we can do. And I'm not even sure if mine was the first mention of Talbot or tent, but all I know is when the idea came, I called him, and he was to see you in about an hour, and he immediately answered the phone and said, yeah, we can do that. So it was like in one moment, and there were more moments like it, but in our confusion of not knowing how to do this, we just kept saying, okay, God, what should we do? And he just beautifully kept answering those. And that happened throughout. Ashley and Beth and some of the ladies, some of the logistics that those ladies pulled off, and the number of the YMCA and just different organizations and churches that came together, it was a beautiful thing to see. To me, it was a beautiful picture of how the Christian community, that's who we are. It's how we're supposed to operate.
Absolutely. And, so I remember this. When you called Dan, they were scheduled to take that tent down that day.
Yes, I forgot that. You're
right.
It
stuck in my head. I'm like, that
Perfect
day.
Timing.
So then it's like you go back before Laura died, and I'm going, why isn't that tent down? And then I knew. It was clear as day why that tent wasn't down. And it was sort of the breadcrumbs of God pointing to things for me, beginning to put it together.
Yeah. So that day for you, your children were amazing. Every funeral that I've been a part of, it seems like it's always the children that steal your heart, no matter how old they are. And tell us a little bit about what was behind your kids deciding to honor her in music.
Well, Evangeline, my youngest, who was singing on the worship team pretty regular, and she heard from God, and she knew that Mom would have wanted her to sing.
Yeah.
And watching that child, and she's not a child anymore, so Evangeline, I know you'll be watching, you're not a child anymore, but watching her strength that day, I was blown away. I just sat there and I knew other people were saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Because she did beautifully, and she held it together. And then all the kids after all, and actually the church was packed, and the other church was pretty full as well, but that place was rocking, like singing the class. And I'd look back occasionally because I'm bawling the whole time, you know. But I just sort of do one of these things occasionally and just take it in, just knowing that, wow, and I have all my kids beside me. But then the kids sing all at the end, and and it was a tribute to their mom. she loved to sit there and watch them play and sing together. And they'd do folk stuff. They would do all kinds of things. And they just felt that that's what they needed to do.
Yeah, I think there's such an important timing in those days from the tragic event to the time that we can lay to rest our loved one. We need that time to process in order to even be able to have a celebration of what's good. It's somehow it's built into the grieving process that God gives us. He gives us permission to just be undone.
Mm-hmm.
But in the celebration, it brings a finality to it, a realness, but it also allows us to the light begins maybe to start creeping into the darkness, and we can remember the goodness. But you can't do that the first day or two.
No.
It takes some space.
And doing it that next Saturday, I wouldn't have changed a thing. Like waiting another week would have been just painful.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. Like just do it. Get as much help as you can and do it, because the fatigue that sets in over even that first week was just insane. And I just determined to go at the reception and shake everyone's hand and hug them. And it was hot. I had my suit jacket on. It was hot, but I was just like.
Plus, Laura had us dressed up in those fancy.
She did, yeah.
Those fancy Kentucky Derby outfits. So,
yep.
Yeah.
And I think some people thought I was crazy when I said that. You might have been one of them. But
no, I fully embraced it because it was about her. It was honoring her.
You did. You look sharp. But I recalled that I have never, since our wedding, which was 29 years ago, almost 30, I had never shook and gone around a room and just intentionally connected with everyone that I could. And I did that. That to me was just saying thank you.
Yeah.
And wanting to embrace other people's pain too. Like it wasn't just about me, that all these people aren't here just for me. They were here because they're hurting, as well. And so I wanted to, that was just a neat opportunity for me to do something. And it was a decision I had to make, Am I going to sit at a table and just mope? Yeah.
So while you're also navigating an incredibly difficult day and your loss, you also are trying to be a minister and a dad to these young adults who've lost their mom. Tell me a little bit about, or tell us a little bit about how'd you balance that?
To be honest, I knew I had to be present with them. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I couldn't hold. I did say I'm sorry a lot because they would say something and I'd start crying. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And they were like, Dad, stop it. They were correcting me, which happens, when you get older.
Yes.
But for me, I felt all I could do in the best way I knew how is to grieve their mom well and to not hide that and to put myself in as much as able in their presence and ask them how I knew how they were doing. I mean, all of us, it's not like I had to go, so how are you doing inside? What are you really thinking?
Right.
But it was just being there.
Yeah.
And, just sharing the emotions and the thoughts. And I started just talking about some good things, and just Mom would have loved this, because one of the things that we all knew is tons of family from Kentucky and everywhere else came. There were kids on the front lawn playing. It was colorful. It was a beautiful day. And I'm like, Laura would have been loving that, and we just talked about her that way. So, but then I got to a point where I knew that I did not have the skill or the understanding or the grasp of what it meant to grieve well. And I can't remember whether you came to me or I came to you, but I was just like, either you said to me, hey, have you considered counseling? Or I said, hey, do you know somebody I can meet? And I think it might have been just you asking. And so I wanted to go because I wanted in that moment, I wanted to know that I was doing well for my kids. Mm-hmm. That was really my only motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just look at the camera for a second. Like I could tell you all these glorious things about how I knew that what I was doing and all this stuff. And knew that I wanted to get better and all this stuff. But at that point, it was a motivation for my kids. Nothing else really mattered.
I do remember you saying, I don't even know I'm not sure even to know if I'm doing this right.
Yeah.
So you didn't have anything to really gauge it on because you've never been through something like this. So.
Yeah. No. And, it was like I had back pain that was pretty substantial before, like my back had totally gone out. Laura tried to drag me across the floor, which is a funny memory now, but it wasn't fun then. And I had trouble sleeping, so I went to the doctor and I went back on this anxiety medication that helps me sleep. And then I was navigating meds with my back pain. And part of it, I got to a point too, and this may be jumping a little bit, but I started realizing I was a little too out of it. Like when I'd wake up, I wasn't myself. Like it wasn't just the grief, but
sure.
I'm like, I gotta back off of this somehow.
Right.
It's
Those
too much.
medications that are trying to slow down your anxiety and slow down your pain your pain reactions can literally begin to slow down your ability to think and function
and heal.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and I'm working on this discipleship process with the church, and I had to change it all. But one of the things I did for my mental piece was to read Tony Evans's book, Divine Disruption. And for those who don't know, he lost his wife of 49 years. And someone made a call. I don't know.
I don't know what that was.
What was that?
We're going to take care of that.
Yeah. But Tony Evans was married to his wife for 49 years. They had 4 kids. So I'm like, I was married 29 and have 4 kids. I read the book, and it was really helpful in a lot of ways. But again, exposing me, I'm like, you had 20 more years with her.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't need to read this book again. Like, I don't know how healthy that was in the moment, but counseling. So, you referred me to Mary Beth.
Mm-hmm.
And I cried the first 2 sessions. I cried the whole time.
Yeah.
The whole time. And, I'm telling her the first session was like to get to know you. Why are you here? And I just told her I want to learn to grieve well. I have no idea. Because in my mind, I know you could probably define different types of grief, but I've never felt what I felt.
Sure. And
I felt a lot of pain in my life. I have never felt this. This was a whole different thing. It was like the tsunami that took me through that mud river through town, and all the obstacles were going, and I just imagined that I wanted it just to take me over and finish me.
I think of that word in Genesis that says, and the two shall become one. There's something spiritual about that. It is the sharing of 2 souls.
Yeah.
There's nothing that, if you haven't experienced it, none of us can really imagine it.
Those were my first words when I stood up on the celebration of life. The 2 shall become, I read that verse, one flesh, and I'm like, I feel as though I have been ripped in half.
Yeah.
That's the most honest. That's how I felt. Like you could have just eviscerated me.
So the counseling, it sounds like the counseling setting for you, you felt completely safe.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't feel any responsibility to care about taking care of the counselor.
Nope.
So you could just be you.
Yep.
And we might need a counseling setting to find that safe place, especially because you're a people helper. Your pastor, your dad, you can't remove your natural sensitivity to also wanting to take care of others in certain moments. So it's great that you create a space for yourself to just allow your soul to grieve.
Yeah, and there was a couple really key points for me there. She asked me, because I think the second morning I spent going through pictures. I'm just bawling in the house going through, and I call it an Easter egg. Like, she had this scrapbook she made of our first 4 years of marriage. I might have seen it, but I can't remember. And that was just overwhelming. I just went through that. And so I was, and Mary Beth's like, so what is it that you fear most? And I had a quick answer: the future. I feared the future because everything involved Laura in my life.
Right.
We were getting ready to become empty nesters. We were in such a beautiful place together as a couple. I wasn't worried. I was worried about her with empty nesters early on or midway through the kids growing up. I was worried. I'm like going, oh my goodness, are we going to be that home? That it's going to. But no, we were both in a great place. So everything, the future without her, just is what terrified me completely. And she said this. She said, Eric, and I know you know this because you're a pastor, whatever. She said, but there's grace for today. She said, don't worry about tomorrow. And you and I both can quote this verse, tomorrow has enough trouble on its own. But that's all that I could focus on was tomorrow.
Sure.
And I saw no hope. At that moment, I didn't feel any hope. And so she said, there's grace for today. And so that became my mantra. And it was like I stopped my brain. We talk a lot about Romans 12, renewing your mind.
Yeah.
I began to reset my brain whenever my brain would go to tomorrow or the next month or vacations. I'm like, nope, today.
Yeah, that's good.
I just got today. And so I tell everyone now, it's like, there's grace for today. Like so I stole it from Mary Beth. It's not my own. She probably stole it from somewhere else. I don't know, but it was good. And, she also helped me because there was a night before I came in there that I felt guilty. So we have a garage, Laura, and I spent a ton of time in. That was the place of deepest grief for me because of our shared experience there in that moment. And I went out to the garage knowing that to me, the choleric personality, I know you're the temperament guy, like I know what I'm getting into, and I chose to go out there. And I started listening to music, and I put myself in a spin. And so I felt like I was going to go, and I had to report on how I did that week.
Yeah.
And I was just like, look, I just got to be honest. I messed up yesterday. And
like she's going to chastise you or something, right?
I was chastising myself, right? I'm like, I knew what I was doing. I'm pretty aware of my misgivings. Like I know but this is what she told me. She said, so tell me how long it lasted with everything. And I just told her, she said, that's probably really healthy. And it was like a moment of, so I didn't fail. Like, because I'm wanting to do well for me. At this point, I'm like, I'm wanting to do the process. I'm wanting to learn to grieve. I want to do this right for the kids. And I felt I failed.
Yeah.
And she said, no. She said, if you stayed there for a couple hours.
Right.
Or you're there all the time.
And sometimes we just have to be very honest with ourselves today about what I'm able to do. Because it was a great idea. Maybe 2 days earlier, you couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
You open the garage, you look at it, and you walk away because not today. That's okay too.
Right.
The Reexposure to these painful memories when you're ready is how you overcome and then create new memories. Some of those same spaces that in the early days were dark and ugly can actually become a place of remembrance and memorial.
Yeah.
But you got to give yourself permission. If it's not today, that's okay.
Right. No, that's a great point. And I had to make a choice to bring other people into those spaces so that it wasn't a cathedral or it wasn't a dark place. So I was bringing new experiences with my kids, with church folk, all these things. I'm like, I know even Christopher over here, I'm like, you guys just got to come in here with me. I had a bunch of guys at my house and cook with me because I need new memories. I didn't have to sit there.
Back to that alone piece. You knew you were continually at the right time, right pace. You were bringing other people into your journey and sharing for new experiences. Just another. I'm gonna keep reemphasizing that for people who are listening. You can't do this alone. There are parts of it that only you and God can deal with, but you can't complete the process. He can't help you walk through the complete process of healing, whatever that looks like, if you're just by yourself.
Yeah, and that's where some people devalue relationships in church or minimize. I feel as though I would not have survived without the people I had around me.
Tell us about your experience with Mark in your house, a brother in the church.
Yeah. So he came over. It was a couple weeks after she passed, and I think it was his first time in my house, and I'm just sitting on the couch crying. You know, it was normal. That was the normal at that point. And then I stood, and he was just great. He just sat there with me. It was just awesome. And then I went around and took him through the hallway where Laura, the week before she died, put up all the family pictures. I'm crying still.
Yeah.
And he looks me right in the face, and he goes, "You're a blessed man."
Wow, that took courage.
I don't even think it was courage as much, and I'm not saying he's not courageous. I just think it was a true recognition of all the blessings I had in my life with my family and stuff.
I give him credit for saying it out loud.
Yes. Now, my not so immediate response, and I joke about this, so you know how I like to overdo things, but I'm like throat punch, right? The first half second was like, what?
Yeah.
Psh.
That's the courage part.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
But the second part, this was a Holy Spirit moment. This is a powerful part of my story. It changed the comparison angle of the future and everything. I'm like, no, I'm blessed. I am blessed. I wasn't guaranteed 29 years of marriage. This could have happened 15 years ago. And actually, Mary Beth recommended a podcast to me, Davey Blackburn, and I hadn't heard the story when it came open. He was a church planner, and his wife of 26 or 27, she was 26 or 27 years old and pregnant, was murdered in their home, and their unborn child was killed. Wow. So for me, I'm like, I don't look at Tony Evans anymore and go, well, I wish I'd have had that. I'm like, man, I didn't have to go through this.
Yeah.
And I listened to other people, and this lady who had 4 little kids and her husband died, and she's telling the story. I'm like going, man, I just can't imagine picking up the pieces and having to be a parent. So my perspective just began to change. And, I realized the blessing, and I see the blessing in my kids, and I see the blessing in my family, and I see the blessing in all her pictures. So it was powerful.
Yeah. Now, I remember there was a woman, speaking of courage, there was a lady who had the courage to send you some what she felt was some words the Lord put on her heart just to share with you. Tell us about that.
Shoo. I get a letter. It was like, you don't get many handwritten letters these days, where you actually get an envelope in the mail. We're so used to emails and stuff, but it just had I think it had Pastor Eric Olson. It was written to here at the church. And I'm like, I wonder who this is. And I'm not going to say her name, but I know she goes to Christ Church. That's what I'll tell you. And I've not yet got a chance to see her and thank her. And I'll explain this in a little bit, but her letter was beautiful. So it just started, it was sometime towards the end of July, and she, paraphrasing, said, I don't know you or your wife, but all I can see in Laura's life is the love of God. And just beautiful words of encouragement. And then it sort of ended with, I got on this Oswald Chambers thing on, and she said, I read it for multiple days, and I almost hesitated at sending you this. She didn't say this, but I almost really believe that she knew God told her to. And so I turned the page over, and we're going to put it on the screen here. The Price of Vision by Oswald Chambers. It's from July 13th reading, if you want to look it up. Isaiah 6:1, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord. And it says, our soul's personal history with God is often an account of the death of our heroes. Over and over again, God has to remove our friends to put himself in their place, and that is when we falter, fail, and become discouraged. Let me think about this personally. When the person died who represented for me all that God was, did I give up on everything in life? That was Laura.
Yeah.
And I was just bawling. I didn't want to hear this.
Yeah.
Did I become ill or disheartened? Or did I do as Isaiah did and see the Lord? My vision of God is dependent upon the condition of my character. My character determines whether or not truth can even be revealed to me. Before I can say I saw the Lord, there must be something in my character that conforms to the likeness of God. Until I am born again and really begin to see the kingdom of God, I only see from the perspective of my own biases. What I need is God's surgical procedure, his use of his external circumstances to bring about an internal purification. Your priorities must be God first, God second, and God third, until your life is continually face to face with God and no one else is taken into account whatsoever. Your prayers will then be, in all the world, there is no one but you, dear God. There is no one but you. Keep paying the price. Let God see that you're willing to live up to the vision.
Wow. So after your first, I guess you probably had a throat punch moment there.
I did.
Okay.
No, I didn't, because it was a lady and I didn't know her.
Right. But metaphorically, so
Yeah.
how did you come to, eventually, how did you come to interpret those words? How do you apply them to your experience now?
Well, let me just first say, if you had sent that to me,
Throat punch.
I probably wouldn't have received it.
Right.
That was my initial feeling. I'm like, so this is another breadcrumb. God touched this lady who didn't know Laura and I and gave her the courage to send me this. I knew it was from the Lord. Like, I didn't like it,
Yeah.
but I knew it was from God. And what was very interesting is that Todd and I, when he was a kid, he helped me learn Isaiah 6 and memorize it. And when I talked to him about this, when it says in the year that King Uzziah died, literally for me, it's like in the year that Laura died, I saw the Lord. And I've cried so many times reading this, and I feel the emotion, but...
Yeah. And when you read this to me and first told me the story of this lady, there's no author that has pierced me more and pressed me more than Oswald Chambers, of all the people I've read. So there's a part of me that knew, because she connected this word of wisdom to Chambers, it gave me some comfort not to try to take it off of you or try to, comfort you. It was like Chambers has pierced me so often, but his truth is truth.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like this is from the Lord. And thank you for raising this lady up. Now I just need to help comfort my brother. And
yeah, it took me a while to swallow that one. It was no easy task for sure. And she, and if you ever hear this or someone knows who it was, I'm thankful and would love to meet you, and I will at some point reach out.
Yeah.
But
so what did you eventually pull out of that word and apply for you? What did you come to hear it to say?
I'm not going to go into it today, but all my story, just about, if not everything about my life. My life was not easy, and Laura was the rock who always loved me unconditionally I've shared before. I don't think it was wise, but when we were first married, she was like, even if you cheat on me, I'm not going to leave you. I'm like, what? Who says this stuff? It was just, I don't advise that to anybody out there. That was Laura. And so she was there with me through the traumas and the anger that I had built up and all these things. And she was my, as Chambers says, she was my everything. She represented God for me.
Yeah.
And so then I was left with a huge void. And I realized that God wanted me to see him in his rightful place. And I know one of the things I didn't tell you about, like with Mary Beth, with the counseling, is she said, she dropped, and I know good counselors do this. She was, so do you ever find yourself talking to Laura? First week, nope. Second week, so have you found yourself talking to Laura? Nope. Then before the third week, I'm like going, she means this for a reason. So I started talking to Laura, and there was a time going down Aurora Street. The sun was shining. And I looked up through the roof of my truck, and I'm like, honey, you healed me. That can sound like sacrilege. I know God's the ultimate.
Yeah.
But I have seen, not just me, but I have seen relationships healed through the loss of my wife. And
yeah.
I know that she would have given herself up just for me. And I'm not saying that's what she did. That's not.
But she would have.
She would have.
Yeah, that was her heart.
Yeah. And so talking to her and saying those things were cathartic. I don't know if that's the word.
No, that absolutely. A popular counseling word is for all of us. One of the definitions of being healthy emotionally and spiritually is to get closer to your authentic self. And it sounds very psychological, and I think it's completely biblical. I think the references of how deeply God knows us and is aware of our pain and joins us in our pain, grieves with us, for us to embrace that and trust that our authentic self is what he has always desired. That's intimacy. And sometimes we can create these theological overcoats that, well, I can't be that, or I can't say that. And even if it's well-intended, I think God in grief, he strips off all of our layers of pretense and says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. And we're reluctant to get there. Sometimes we're just trying to get up and do it ourselves until we exhaust ourselves, and he's right there to meet us. So sometimes my clients are a little reluctant when I ask the same question, do you talk to them? And if I sense that they aren't comfortable theologically with that, I just suggest that they give Jesus the message to pass along. Because I think wherever our loved ones are, Jesus has access to communicating with them. So you can pour out your heart to Jesus and say, please tell Laura or tell my Beth that I love them. Yeah. But it needs to be released. We still feel the connection. And I don't think it's healthy to deny the connection.
No, I agree. Completely agree.
Yeah.
There was something you said yesterday when we were reviewing our thoughts for this that stuck with me, and I think it's worth saying. I was like, I finally am becoming like who God intended me to, or like
we are finally seeing the person that you've always been. Yeah. And it took the grief to kind of remove the dross, just for you to become more authentic and transparent. I don't think I've ever felt your hugs to be more sincere and comfortable. And I've known you for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Because God is creating a deeper sense of empathy for other people, you know, and a sincere care. You joke for many years, you know, I pastor, I don't always like people, but I think even people who are seeing this podcast or have heard you preach recently, there's a depth to your affection for people because you've been through something that while it's broken you, it's also helped for your real, authentic, if you will say, the new creation of Christ to come more alive and more evident. Sorry you had to go through this to get here, but
we know the bargaining side of things is like, did I really have to have this?
Exactly.
Did it take this? And, you know, you just have to give it over.
Yeah.
You know, God is sovereign, and God, one of the things that a lot of people ask me about my anger towards God and how did I get around that was, for me, as I realized in Laura and I's study of our whole get the hell out thing, those of you who know, you know, but it really taught me that God despises anything to do with death. And like, he doesn't, like, even through blood in the Old Testament, like, especially women get viewed as less than. But the birthing process and even the menstrual part is something, it's representative of death, not the birthing process, but the blood during that time, and God can't look at it. And so he hates death. And so when I was able to turn it to God's plan in the garden wasn't death. And so now we live in a fallen world, and Satan and sin were the cause of death. So I'm not going to be angry at God. That had to be a transformation moment for me.
Yeah.
That I just can't do that anymore. And so that study and that time really helped me through that piece.
I think you're describing the picture of Jesus at the tomb of Lazarus, the hatred of death and being overwhelmed. First of all, that he would allow himself to share and allow his spirit to be overwhelmed with the people shows his compassion for us. But I think it also showed his feelings about death. They both grieved him and I think anger him.
Yeah.
You know, so when he says to come out, it was a command, almost like enough of this, come out so we could have life.
Yeah.
I wish it was that easy in our journey, but we do see it's comforting to know that we have the lover of our soul who's there with us and grieving with us. You mentioned about having talking with Laura. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that have gone on, whatever you're willing to share, as far as your thinking about her, maybe dreams, or you mentioned earlier you kept waiting for her to, I think you said, come home. So tell us about that process and where is that today?
It's a lot better. And actually it was a big demarcation point for me. It was at least a month or two. My body, my brain, whatever it is, kept expecting the door to open up, kept expecting her to walk up into the bedroom, kept expecting her to be by my side. I mean, 29 years of sleeping together, you know, just being next to each other.
Sure.
We never got a big bed because we always wanted to be close. And those were, when that finally ended, that piece, it was easier for me to pursue more healing because it was just a constant knockdown. Dreams were hard too, and still occasionally are hard. I would have a dream that she was there and I was sharing stuff with her and I was so happy. Then you wake up and it's just like total, you know, and now my brain will tell me, it doesn't happen all the time, but even I shared that, I believe, that I had a dream that I was jealous of how she was talking to some guy. And this is not what happens in our relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And I was a jerk. This is like a week or two ago. And I'm going, man, I was a jerk. And I was actually excited to go ask her for forgiveness. And my mind's going, why am I excited about this? Boom, I woke up.
Yeah.
And it was like, I'd love to say I'm sorry and ask for forgiveness from her again. I'd love to repent of my dumb self again. You know.
So your brain, it sounds like, was just constantly throwing in images and conversations, either when you're awake or when you're asleep. Your brain is constantly trying to make sense of your new reality.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've shared with my clients, it's this picture of you have a puzzle of 1,000 pieces that when you lay it out, all the pieces fit, and somebody comes from underneath of it in the middle and pops their hand up in the middle, and all of a sudden that picture is now completely scattered everywhere. So recovery from a trauma or loss is the brain trying to put back the pieces so it can create the picture again. With grieving, you can't create the same picture because now you're living a new reality. But the brain still tries to put that picture back because that was safe. And it literally is so strong that you can see visions and hear voices and dream about people. And I've had folks ask me, am I going crazy? And the answer is no. But your brain's trying to recover, and it will recover. It won't ever be the same, but you'll begin to create a new puzzle. It'll look different. Different people will come in, and now they're going to be part of the puzzle that weren't there before because God knew you needed them. So that's kind of a metaphoric picture of it, but if the craziness feels like crazy, it's not. It's just healing.
Yeah. No, it's good. And it actually took me back to another demarcation point for me, and this is relatively early on. I felt for my kids, like when Laura's mom passed, Hunter was just born. So they never knew her. And all the kids ever heard was, your grandma would have spoiled you to death. You know, she'd have been all over your life. And I'm going, we were planning grandma camp at the house. We were going to design everything for all this. And now it's just me. And I don't have all those giftings. So I was sort of self-loathing in that. I'd feel for the kids. I'd feel their loss, you know, and I'm like, I can't feel it.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, I'm not Laura. And I was beating myself up pretty hard, like going, again, sort of negotiating with God, why not me? Because why not, right? But 2 families came over to my house, and my kids were there. And their kids came with me. They were in my family room, and I was on the floor playing with them and just having fun with them. And I sat back on the chair, and I started thinking about Laura and Grandma. And then I saw this beautiful thing of my kids were doing what Laura would have done. And God distinctly told me is you do not have to be Laura for them. Her DNA is already in there. They're going to bring, and that was so freeing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, for those who...
You can't be her.
No, but I mean, I am more joyful now. Like I am a little more fun now because life has taken me to a place where in the reality of like, I don't know about tomorrow. Like I am not guaranteed it.
Right.
It's crystal clear now.
And to relieve the pressure of, you already know you can't be her, but to relieve the pressure that I don't have to be her is trusting both God and everybody else is going through their process, just like you're having your individual moments that bring some relief. They're having their moments too.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy because that healing that's taken place, that is in process of taking place. I mean, it's come a long way and I can feel it. And the peace that I don't even want to count how many people have said that I'm different. And
yeah,
again, it's a double-edged sword But I sort of do, it's that lady that talked about flowers to Jesus, right? It's like, okay, whatever it takes. I was blessed. And so, it really began to look to, I did have to plan some forward. Mm-hmm. And Thanksgiving was coming, which, Laura, I mean, she was...
All the holidays were a big deal.
Massive deal.
Yeah.
And this is really neat, man. Laura's brother and all their family that could come drove from Kentucky to be with us on Thanksgiving. And Evangeline, my youngest, she got mom's apron on and her cookbook is out, and she figured out how to do most of what Laura would do. And I went shopping, which I never had to do for Thanksgiving, but we created a list, and everyone pulled together. There was a definite loss, mm-hmm. but man, everyone coming together, no one was alone. And I just, that family, if you ever watch this, like the family coming from far away to be with us for Thanksgiving was just beautiful.
So it sounds like your choice to maintain the tradition was part of your way of also honoring her.
Absolutely.
Because I know it can be so tempting in our distress and depression. We end up not only losing the person, but then we also lose the tradition connected to the person.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing the tradition as a way to staying connected, sometimes we can give up because Christmas doesn't feel like it used to. And I know some folks who have kind of skipped holidays, mm-hmm. at least the first go round.
No, I knew this was just something I knew that I couldn't do for my kids. Mm-hmm. Like this was more motivated by my children than it was for me. But I'm like, they don't have her. I've got to do whatever I can. I can't be her, but whatever was in my power to do, I was going to do. And so I remember crying Christmas morning, filling up all the kids' stockings because, Laura did that. I only filled hers, and Evangeline had asked me, can we put mom's stocking up? I'm like, absolutely. And I put some stuff in there, and it was just sort of like, I knew she wasn't going to use it, but I was like, I just wanted to celebrate her memory. And I had to, all of us felt a little numb. So I don't want to be like, oh, this Christmas was just fantastic. But we were present.
Yeah.
And we grieved some, we laughed some, and we were all tired. We were emotionally drained by that afternoon. I was earlier, I was done. But man, it was as beautiful as it could be. And so.
Yeah, and one thing I love that I hear what you're saying, I know there's a lot of us, we're all in different places in our spiritual walk. We would love to be so connected to God and so holy that our primary inspiration for doing everything is for Him. My experience, the reality is, sometimes God is my biggest motivator, and sometimes He helps me find things that help me to be motivated. Absolutely. And for you, it was your kids.
Yep.
So if anybody is trying to find the inspiration or the energy to get up, find what's important to you and make that the reason you get up.
Yeah.
Keep talking to God in the process, and maybe He'll become more the motivation. But in the beginning, I always share with people, you use whatever it takes.
Absolutely.
To help you to keep walking forward.
Yep.
So.
No, and I would strongly encourage people, and it's not going to be easy to do those things, to do those memories. I took Laura's cousins on a boat ride to Oxford, and this is maybe August, so a month after she died. And we drove in, those of you know the Oxford area, our first stop was, I showed them where I asked Laura to marry me at the Oxford Park, and I told them the story, and I'm crying telling it, right?
Yeah.
Then we go to pass what used to be called Pier Street, I guess it's docks now. There's a federal lab there where Laura's dad worked, and that's where our first kiss was. And I'm crying telling them the story. Then we go back to get ice cream in the, gosh, I'm blanking, but the ice cream place in Oxford. And by boat, we get at a dock, and then we dock off by near the cemetery.
Mm.
And I looked over there, and I had the memory that probably a month ago or so that I had told her someday we're going to be there.
Wow.
That wasn't easy. Like,
Sure.
I'm not going, but processing that, and they sat with me as I cried. You know, it wasn't like I didn't have to be strong for anybody. Like, I never felt maybe occasionally, maybe with my kids, but I didn't feel like I had to be strong for anybody. And, you know, that made it a little more bearable. So putting you in those places, like I know now, Easter week's going to be hard, but I could choose to just sort of get by or embrace it, because I know it's going to be it's not going to be easy.
Sure.
I know God's grace is there when that day comes. So
and you're not by yourself in trying to face it.
Not at all. I've got a whole family of godly people around me who are joining me in that. And then literally it's like May is my next, after Easter, May is my next, her birthday was on the 3rd. Our anniversary would be 30 years. It was on the 22nd. Mother's Day's mixed in there.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about the kids.
So we're going to have to stay close to you come May, right?
I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. But it's like, I know that. And I've intentionally, like, I've ordered the placard or whatever, for lack of a better word, the monument with her name and stuff on it. Mm-hmm. And I haven't gone. I just don't want to go until that's there. And so they've already told me, like, the whole goal has been to have it there in April, so that on her birthday, this is the first day I'll go back. But it's not like I've been avoiding it. It's going to be special for me that it's not just the ground I'm looking at, you know.
Yeah.
So it's.
So one of the things, as I think probably kind of wrapping up your story here, that I want to take my friend hat off for a second, and just what I've noticed that I think's been so amazing in your journey is that you haven't denied your feelings. You haven't shut them down. Even when you apologize occasionally for them, which you didn't even need to, but you didn't pretend like they weren't there. And I think that's psychologically and emotionally a major contribution to where you are today, because you haven't denied your pain, and you haven't been so spiritually minded that you weren't real.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Hopefully that's part of the message that folks are getting from your story, is an encouragement for them to be real and to not suffer alone.
Absolutely. On one of the podcasts, Nothing is Wasted podcast, this guy talked about advocating for people in your grief. And, you know, I sort of took that as a mantra to some point. It wasn't like I'm going to go stay busy serving so that I don't deal with my stuff. But just one instance, I was in my office. Laura's picture's in my office, and actually not right this second, but it's there. And I just got this moment of despair. And as I call it, I was climbing into the hole. Like, I knew what I was doing, and I was making a choice there. And so I tried. I'm going, perspective, Eric, you're blessed. Nothing. Tried to think of all the other people who have had worse than me, didn't do any good. And then I remembered the guy's words. He's like, advocate for other people. And so there's a young man in my life who I love. It was his birthday, and I wasn't going initially. I had plans to take him out for his birthday, but that moment, it was about me getting away from that pit. And so I texted his mom, like, hey, can I take him today? And it worked out. And I laughed. I've got pictures of it. I laughed so hard for an hour and a half because I wanted to make his day, but he made mine.
Yeah.
And so if you're out there and maybe nothing else is working, find a way to bless other people. I mean, it's spiritual too. It's a blessing.
Yeah. You're probably not going to get out of your mood by outthinking it.
No.
It's changing your environment, being around some other people. And children are just an amazing, they're the opposite of death. They bring life and energy. So.
Yeah. And they, it's neat to see the kids, and they'll call her Granty, and, dear friend of mine, texted me on Sunday. He's like, I had a moment ironing my shirt and I just lost it. And he wrote me, and then the kids saw that he was crying, and they're like, Granty. And he's like, yeah, and this is the process. I never know when I'm going to cry, but folks, I can just say God is good, and he's given us all that we need, but we have to do the work. We can't just sit idly by and say God is sovereign. We have to do our part to experience his blessings. And I've not done it perfectly, but the main reason I wanted to do this is because I've run into people now, maybe you're one of them, who haven't processed their grief. And now I see it. And I want them to find help. And I'm trying to think of your lingo, hope, healing, and
hope for today, help for tomorrow.
Yep. I want to find that. I want you to find grace for today. I want you to be able to not be guilty about your emotions and let them flood. And it's hurtful. It hurts. Dear God, it hurts. But it's the only way. I actually had a quote here that I found that says, we can't heal what we don't feel. So if we suppress those feelings, they're not going to get healed. And so there's hope for you. And I can't recommend Robb enough to you if you're looking for a local counselor. And I just got to say again, Robb, I love you, and Beth. And
we love you, brother.
And I know, and I thank you again for being there, and even this day being here and sharing life together with you. I'm blessed.
Can we close? I'd love to pray for you. And,
Absolutely.
Just for the folks out there as well. God, we're so thankful that we do not serve a high priest who has not been through every circumstance, everything we've been through. Lord, you have grieved death. Lord, you have felt even the aloneness at times when you were on the cross. So I just thank you for my brother. It's hard for me to thank you for what he's gone through. It's hard for me. But Lord, I say thank you for bringing something good from what the enemy intended for harm. And Lord, for all of us here who are grieving now or who will grieve, we ask you by your grace and by your mercy to meet us in those dark places, that you would give us the courage and the strength and the faith to sit with you, even before we begin to walk with you, just to sit with you and to be ministered to. Lord, we know that wherever we are today is not where we're going to be tomorrow. So thank you for the grace for today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen.